The question has circulated in defense forums, aviation communities, and geopolitical commentary for over a decade. Did Israel receive the source code to the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter? The answer is no, and the official record on this point is unambiguous. The United States government and Lockheed Martin retain exclusive control over the F-35 operational flight program software, and that software has not been released in full to any foreign partner, customer, or ally. What makes the question genuinely interesting is not the answer itself, but what Israel actually did receive, and why that matters more than the source code ever would. The distinction between what Israel got and what everyone assumes it got reveals something fundamental about how the United States structures military technology relationships in the 21st century. In November 2009, John Schreiber, the Pentagon head of F-35 International Affairs, made the U.S. position explicit in terms that admitted no ambiguity. Speaking to Reuters, Schreiber stated, "No partner country is getting the so-called source code. That includes everybody." This was not a diplomatic hedge or a press conference deflection. It was a formal articulation of program policy that has remained in force without exception from that point forward. In 2015, Lieutenant General Christopher Bogdan, then serving as the head of the F-35 Joint Program Office, reinforced this when directly asked about Israel's position. Bogdan stated, "It is a true statement that some portions of the F-35 are not releasable to any partners or customers on the F-35, not uniquely Israel." The phrase, "not uniquely Israel," is a critical clause. It established that whatever restrictions applied to Tel Aviv also applied to London, The Hague, Ottawa, Tokyo, and Canberra without differentiation. U.S. retains exclusive software control. The same principle remains operative. The U.S. government and Lockheed Martin retain exclusive access to the F-35 core software, and no foreign operator is permitted to alter it. Understanding Israel's position requires first understanding what the program's most privileged partners actually received, because those partners set the ceiling, and that ceiling is lower than most people expect. The United Kingdom entered the F-35 program as its single largest foreign financial contributor, committing approximately $2 billion in 2001 and securing industrial work-share equivalent to roughly 15% of the value of every aircraft produced. British companies, most notably BAE Systems, write portions of the F-35 source code, as U.S. subcontractors BAE engineers have necessarily read the sections they authored. But BAE Systems does not own that code, does not control the broader operational flight program, and cannot modify or distribute it outside the contractual relationship governed by U.S. program authorities. When the United Kingdom needs updates to threat libraries or mission data files beyond what it can generate through its own reprogramming participation, operators queue through the reprogramming lab at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, the same facility through which multiple partner nations coordinate software updates. The United Kingdom secured the most extensive industrial role of any foreign partner and still does not hold unrestricted access to the software architecture its own engineers helped build. The Netherlands, a Level 2 partner in the program, occupies a more constrained position. Dutch Defense Ministry officials have acknowledged in public statements that the Netherlands does not possess source code control and has limited visibility into sensitive software components. Japan's case is particularly instructive because it involves licensed final assembly. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries builds F-35I airframes at its Nagoya facility under a foreign military sales arrangement, yet the software that runs those aircraft is delivered preloaded and encrypted from the United States, and Japanese technicians have no authority to edit or interrogate it. It is worth noting that in 2019, the United States reportedly offered Japan some degree of source code access in the context of the separate F-3 next-generation fighter co-development discussions. But that proposal concerned a different program and a different bilateral negotiation, and it did not alter the standard terms under which Japan operates its existing F-35 fleet. Japan assembles the airframe, the United States controls the software. Those remain separate domains. Israel's relationship with the F-35 program is structurally different from every other operator. Not because Israel received greater access to the aircraft core software, but because Israel negotiated the right to integrate its own systems into the aircraft in a way that no other country has achieved. The origin of this arrangement traces to the letter of offer and acceptance signed between Washington and Jerusalem on October 7, 2010, which included provisions that were architecturally unique in the history of the program. Israel requested, and the United States agreed, that Israeli-developed C-4 systems, radio architectures, and electronic warfare suites produced by Israeli defense companies, including Israel Aerospace Industries and Elbit Systems, would be physically integrated into F-35 airframes during production at Lockheed Martin Fort Worth, Texas facility. A portion of this integration was conducted at the factory level before delivery. Additional Israeli systems have also been incorporated through subsequent upgrades and retrofits conducted in Israel after aircraft delivery, including at the Israeli Air Force Base. The arrangement is therefore a combination of factory floor integration and post-delivery modification, not a single point of installation. The result of that arrangement is the F-35I Adir, the only F-35 national variant designation that exists outside the standard A, B, and C model family. The designation Adir, meaning mighty in Hebrew, is not ceremonial. It marks the only F-35 variant authorized to carry an Israeli-built mission computer, with Israeli C-4 radios and EW systems integrated alongside the standard U.S. core software. It is not a structural redesign of the airframe, but it is far more than a name change. The Israeli Air Force took delivery of aircraft carrying IAI upgraded C-4 architecture, Israeli selected radio systems, and EW packages built around Israeli threat assessments and operational doctrine, all running alongside an airframe that still executes the United States core operational flight program. It is important to note that structurally, the F-35I remains an F-35A. It is not a separate airframe design or a fundamentally different aircraft. What distinguishes it is the additional mission system layer that Israel has been permitted to install and operate. In 2016, when Israel received its first F-35, IAI Lahav Division General Manager Benny Cohen described this integration architecture in an interview with Defense News using a precise analogy. The Israeli systems function like an application installed on an iPhone, providing advanced processing and output capability without altering the underlying operating system. The phone core software remains American. The application runs on top of it. This distinction is operationally significant in a specific and bounded sense. Israel F-35 carry a partially autonomous mission system layer, one that Israel can update with Israeli-developed threat data, Israeli-developed EW responses, and Israeli-selected weapons parameters through channels that do not require waiting for a full U.S. reprogramming cycle on those specific layers. For a country operating in an environment as tactically compressed and rapidly evolving as the one Israel faces, that degree of mission system autonomy has genuine battlefield value. But it is not source code access. Lockheed Martin managed the interface architecture. U.S. authorities approved every integration specification, the underlying avionics architecture, the flight control software, and the core mission systems remain exclusively American property. An Israel custom layer depends on that American foundation remaining intact and operational. Germany entry into the F-35 program, announced in 2022 as part of the Bundeswehr decision to replace its aging Panavia Tornado fleet, produced a different kind of exceptional permission within the program structure. The Tornado had served as Germany's delivery platform under NATO nuclear sharing arrangement, capable of carrying American B-61 nuclear gravity bombs under a dual-key authorization framework that is a formal NATO collective deterrence mechanism. Any replacement aircraft needed to carry the same mission, meaning it needed to be certified to carry the B-61-12, the modernized thermonuclear gravity bomb that had entered the NATO stockpile as the successor to earlier B-61 variants. The United States had to certify the F-35A to perform this mission before Germany could finalize its procurement on operationally meaningful terms. That certification was completed on October 12, 2023. F-35 Joint Program Office spokesman Russ Gomer confirmed the milestone in March 2024, stating that the F-35A achieved nuclear certification ahead of schedule and that the F-35A is the first fifth-generation nuclear-capable aircraft ever and the first new platform to achieve this status since the early 1990s. The certification work was performed entirely by U.S. personnel, specifically test assets from the 422nd and 59th Test and Evaluation Squadrons of the U.S. Air Force, which released B-6112 Joint Test Assembly units during flight trials completed in October 2021, 2 years before the formal certification date. The Luftwaffe response when the certification was publicly confirmed was direct. German defense officials stated the milestone was quite important for our procurement, and that this hurdle has also been overcome. What Germany did not receive, did not request, and was not offered is source code access. German F-35A carry the standard F-35A designation. There is no F-35G, no special variant suffix, no unique designation reflecting the nuclear role. The aircraft Germany will operate are software identical to the F-35A paraded by the Netherlands, Norway, and Denmark. The only operationally relevant difference is that U.S. teams have pre-certified those airframes to deliver a specific American weapon under a protocol entirely managed through U.S. custody and authorization chains. It is also worth being precise about what separates Israel's situation from Germany here. Israel is not part of NATO nuclear sharing framework, that is a NATO structure, and Israel is not a NATO member. The comparison between Israel F-35I privileges and Germany nuclear certification is therefore not a comparison of trust levels between two countries competing for the same access. They are two countries that receive two entirely different categories of permission because they occupy two entirely different strategic relationships with the United States. Both permissions are exceptional. Neither involves source code. The reason the source code question matters beyond individual country comparisons is what it reveals about the structural logic the United States embedded into the F-35 program from the beginning. Every F-35 in operational service worldwide interfaces with Odin, the operational data integrated network that replaced the earlier Alice system as the F-35 central logistics and sustainment backbone. Odin is a U.S.-hosted cloud platform through which operators receive maintenance data, software updates, supply chain information, and mission system revisions. All F-35 use Odin for logistics, but Israel and some partners filter tactical data through national gateways. The architecture gives the United States significant and enduring influence over fleet support across all operators, not as a unilateral off-switch for which no public evidence exists, but as a structural dependency that shapes what every operator can do independently and what it must route through American channels to accomplish. That distinction matters. The influence is real, it is built into the program design, and it is not the same as a remote control. Mission data files, the threat libraries that tell the aircraft electronic warfare systems how to identify and respond to adversary radar, missile guidance, and electronic emissions, represent a related dimension of this architecture. The reprogramming lab at Eglin Air Force Base remains the primary facility through which updated threat data is developed and distributed, and U.S. authorities coordinate that process. However, some partners, including the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and to a degree Israel through its modular EW layer, have varying levels of participation in sovereign reprogramming activities, allowing them to generate and apply certain threat file updates through national channels. This is not a monolithic system in which everything flows exclusively from a single American point of control. It is a layered architecture in which the United States holds the central position and retains the most consequential authorities, while partners operate with varying degrees of autonomy within the boundaries that their bilateral agreements established. The F-35 program access structure is best understood not as a single threshold of source code yes or source code no, but as a layered set of permissions, each individually negotiated, each stopping well short of the core operational flight program. At the top of that structure sits the United States, which owns the source code, manages Odin, coordinates Eglin, and retains final authority over every software baseline the aircraft will ever run. Below that, program partners occupy positions determined by their financial contribution, their industrial role, their strategic relationship with Washington, and the specific bilateral negotiations that shape their entry. The United Kingdom sits at the highest foreign tier and still cannot access the complete software architecture its own subcontractors help build. BAE engineers have necessarily read the portions they authored, but they do not own them and cannot redistribute them. Japan assembles airframes and receives encrypted software it cannot open. The Netherlands operates the aircraft and depends largely on U.S. and partner-coordinated infrastructure to keep it current. Israel sits in a category that has no structural parallel in the program history. The F-35I Adir designation is the most visible evidence of what sustained bilateral trust, combined with deliberate negotiating leverage and a recognized requirement for mission system sovereignty, can produce within the F-35 permission architecture. Unlike Germany, which uses Odin directly for all data types, Israel filters sensitive tactical data through national gateways before it reaches U.S. servers. This gives Israel a degree of data autonomy that no other F-35 operator, including nuclear-certified Germany, possesses. No foreign operator has received unrestricted access to the complete F-35 operational flight program, and there is no indication that the United States intends to grant such access under current policy. What foreign operators have received selectively and on terms negotiated individually are the rights to use specific capabilities that American ownership makes possible. Those rights are always conditioned on the relationship remaining intact, always bounded by the infrastructure the United States anchors, and always reversible if the strategic calculus changes. The F-35 is not just an aircraft. It is a structured set of relationships, and the source code is the document that defines the limits of every one of them.